Good morning. I'm talking this morning with Daniel McGregor, author of the newly released book, Holy Dark Places. Good morning, Daniel.
Good morning, sir.
Nice to have you here. We want to talk about this little book, and I think probably the first thing that's going to strike people is that title, Holy Dark Places, because I imagine there's not a few Christians out there who don't really like the combination of holy and dark. So maybe you could explain how what that means and what we're talking about.
Well, like any good evangelical, we go to C.S. Lewis for our best inspiration. So the title actually comes from C.S. Lewis's book, Till We Have Faces. In that book, he says that holy places are dark places. It is life and strength, not knowledge and words, that we get in them. So piggybacking on that phrase from C.S. Lewis, the notion of the title really draws attention to the fact that there are times in a believer's life that are difficult, that seem that the individual has been abandoned by God, and it's those places where real strength and stability and growth happen.
Okay, so you would probably not then be one who would preach that the Christian life is, how shall I say, an always upward, happy, brightly lit sort of a journey.
No, not at all. Not at all. I'm very much more St. John of the Cross, Dark Night of the Soul, kind of Jim Elliot. Sometimes life doesn't work out the way we want it kind of guy.
Okay, so if we look at that, not every darkness, I would guess, is particularly holy. What kind of a point in your life is this kind of holy dark place? What makes the difference if you're having a moment of darkness or a period of darkness in your life where you can say that's holy?
I think the big thing, looking at the scriptural basis for these types of moments, is they're not born out of discipline or sin. I think one of the things that marks these periods of wilderness is that, for example, Jesus obviously was not a individual caught up in a sin being disciplined, yet he goes through the 40 days of temptation in the wilderness. Paul is being obedient to his newfound calling, but yet still spends 7 years tent making in preparation for his ministry. I think there's something to the reality that these times are to teach obedience. These times are meant to not strictly be punitive, if that answers the question.
Yes, I think many Christians imagine that if you're having a difficult time in your life, that it must be punitive, and rather than learning. And I was thinking, as you were going through the scriptural examples, you might start a conversation like this wondering, okay, what are the scriptural examples of these holy dark places? But I think the harder thing would be to find major biblical characters whose lives did not display some form of a dark place. Would you agree with that?
Certainly. Moses, Abraham, Jonah, Jeremiah, Paul, Peter, many of them experienced a moment where they felt abandoned by God and left to their own devices. And it was really a matter of how they're going to respond to that moment, that crisis that really teaches them, grows them, matures them in the faith.
Okay, let's step back here just a moment from that, although it's a very interesting subject. Having just taught Sunday school lessons that involved Jeremiah, I think dark places are certainly a familiar one from Jeremiah. But what led you, this is your Master of Sacred Theology, based on your Master of Sacred Theology thesis.
Yes, sir.
Something leads a person, I know, having written one, to write a thesis on a subject. What is it in your experience, or how did your experience lead up to the point of writing this book?
This is really a book born out of my own existential question. I graduated with my Master's of Divinity in 2006. And I had always assumed, made the assumption that once I had the degree, that I would find myself in a position where I would be in full-time ministry. And that God would lead me to a church, and that ordination would be a part of that. Going now on 11 years since graduation, I'm neither in full-time ministry, nor am I ordained. And it was really born of a question of why do these periods happen? Why am I experiencing this? What's the purpose in a time of just feeling not fulfilled and not doing what I feel I'm called to do? And so from there, and from that question came the thesis.
Okay, I'm going to lead into my next question is, and I'll do the lead in after I give you the question, which is what should a Christian do on encountering, as you're encountering this sort of a period in your life. And I'm not sure exactly how you recognize it, other than things are not going so well. But I noticed you went through your Master's of Divinity, and then you're facing, you're not finding the place in ministry that you expected, which is not exactly a rare experience for somebody doing a Master of Divinity degree, and at least in my understanding, that sometimes it just doesn't happen. And you went on to get this Master's in Sacred Theology, continue to pursue your calling. So with that kind of a background there, what would you say to a Christian who says, I'm getting into a dark place here? What are we going to do with it?
I think the first thing I think to do is to deepen your prayer life, to deepen your time praying to the Father, and just asking, okay, what am I supposed to learn? What's the lesson here? And secondly, I think it's a matter of obedience. Just because you're going through a dark time doesn't mean you get to rebel. Part of it is seeing, okay, when I'm blessed, I think there's a part of these periods where it's a matter of God seeing how you're going to react when you're not blessed and you're not fruitful, and whether or not you stay faithful and obedient and humble before the Lord.
That's, how shall I say, that's one of the, I think the term that I've heard some people use as the Brussels sprouts message as opposed to the Twinkie message.
Very much so.
But I think it does resonate with many of those scriptural examples that that you've mentioned. So let's move straight on from there. In your book, what is it that you address if a person picks this up and says, I'm either in, I'm going in, I want to understand the holy dark place? What is it there that you address in the book? How do you approach coming to understand? And know that your last chapter is the practical steps, but the practical steps grow out of other things.
I think that I try to give somewhat of the contours of a life in the wilderness, a life in the dark place, how one can be obedient. I think we look at, the example that comes to mind is Israel in Babylon. That there was something to be learned in Israel, or by Israel in Babylon, and that was really to put away idols. The Israelites, up until their Babylonian captivity, had always flirted with idols and always flirted with idol worship. After the Babylonian captivity, they don't worship the gods of Moloch and the like. And I think I try to show how these periods kind of teach specific things, and how they're lessons of God's grace in the midst of these things. God's purpose is not derailed in these times, but that He is working in just a way that is uncomfortable at times.
Okay, and we have, I'll remind people, the scriptural background and also the background of a number of people who have written about the experience of dark places. What I'd like to conclude with is, I know a little bit of your own theological background and in what you're working on at this point. I know you're part of the Anglican Church in North America.
Yes, sir.
Just give us a quick introduction to that and into the seminary or the school where you took your Master of Sacred Theology. I think some people would be interested in that background and the school.
Well, the Anglican Church in North America is a growing denomination that seeks to be biblically faithful and orthodox to historic Christianity. This is a group of churches and leaders and priests who, when the Episcopal Church kind of went off the rails a number of years ago, decided they had had enough and chose to leave the Episcopal Church in hopes of being and continuing to be faithfully orthodox. Many of the ACNA bishops and churches have strong relationships with churches in Africa, particularly Rwanda, Nigeria, Kenya, Uganda. And they are, again, seeking to provide an Anglican witness of orthodoxy in North America. The school that I attended, Trinity School for Ministry, is how would I put this? It teaches and instructs students who are mainly coming from liturgical traditions. So Presbyterian, which is, liturgical light, Lutheran, and Anglican denominations send students to the school. The school is particularly evangelical in the way it understands faith and practice, and does a very good job of preparing people, both men and women, for ministry in their local context.
Okay, and that's where you did the study that you have for this. I want to thank you for being with us today, and remind people the book is Holy Dark Places by Daniel McGregor. It's available from Energion Publications and major online retailers, and there will be links on this YouTube video to allow you to order the book. Thank you.
Thank you.